just go and do it and see what happens.
Ideas are worth like jack shit, absolute jack shit. Like if you can't execute, there's nothing.
Just take that initiative to actually take whatever crazy ideas that they might have and just try to see what comes of it.
Don't be afraid of ambition. Chase it, love it, wrap your arms around it and say it out loud.
New Zealanders don't know any better. They will just get up and give it a shot. That's why we were first to get to the top of Mount Everest.
Go to dream that ultimate dream. Like, what is it that you ultimately want to do? And it's all achievable.
Today, we've got a very special, incredibly timely episode for you. Ever since we started TechMates, we had some great conversations about geopolitical sovereignty in this part of the world and the founders building the next wave of defense technology. We've put together 3 powerful conversations that have stuck with us and shaped our thinking over the past year. We'll dive into the need for deterrence, how fast local manufacturing is becoming the ultimate weapon, and how venture capital is rewriting its rules to fund dual-use technology. It's all about protecting our future by being prepared. Let's start with Tran and his sobering wake-up call on why we can't afford to ignore defense anymore.
We combine our powers, can we build something in this space? And it's the way any good startup starts. It was organic. It wasn't with purpose, it was organic. And then off the back of that, we really looked at pivoting his business. We like to say that he used to be 98% aerospace, 2% defense. Now he's 98% defense, 2% aerospace with a 2% margin of error, right? So we're pretty much a defense business. And what we focus on is something called solid rocket motors. Now, what solid rocket motors are is you have 2 types of motors in essence. You have liquid motors, which Rocket Lab and SpaceX will use because they can throttle them, reuse them, etc. And you have solid rocket motors, which are like just giant firecrackers. You light them, you can't throttle them, you can't put them out, they just fire. The thing about solid rocket motors is they're used heavily across defense because they're highly stable once you've made them, and you can transport them and store them very easily as opposed to a liquid motor, which is why almost every single missile you can think of is powered by a solid rocket motor. The challenge is globally, at least in the Western world, there are 2 major providers of solid rocket motors. It's a duopoly, Aerojet Rocketdyne and Northrop Grumman. Now, today, you don't have to be a genius to see the fact that the amount of money that is being spent on defense is insane. But the global primes, which are the large defense companies, their ability to cater for this demand will be impossible, right? Like they just don't have the ability to move fast enough to cater for this space. So our thesis is really simple. There will be a proliferation, and there already is started, but our thesis back then was there's going to be a proliferation of defense companies across the world, right? And you just have to open up the newspaper today, if anyone even reads the newspaper anymore, and see what's happening there. So, but more importantly for us, it's not about trying to capture opportunities or demand, right? At the end of the day, building a large successful company is actually going to be the byproduct of focusing on building something that Australia really needs, which is the ability to build defense capability, and the area that is most scary that no one wants to touch, which is lethality, which is missiles, right? So I say to people that I stepped back from Go One, I did my own version of Eat, Pray, Love and wandered the wilderness, and I ended up at guided weapons and missiles after leaving education technology, right? But the honest truth of it is the best way to be able to describe it to you is what we call the porcupine or the echidna strategy, right? If you think about the echidna or the porcupine, it doesn't have all those spikes on its back because it wants to go out and kill things. It has those spikes on its back so that when a predator looks at it, they might think twice before they want to have a bite, right? So that's why they call it defense, not offense, right? Australia is not looking to invade another country. Though New Zealand looks pretty good, probably not at this point in time, right? What's important is Australia needs the ability to defend itself. And I'm going to put it this way to you, Mark, who has a child, and Hendrik, who's expecting a child. I think that the chances of my kids who are 6 and 3 today picking up a gun in the next 20 years, not because they want to, because they want to join the army, but because they have to defend their country, it is higher in the next 20 years than it was in the last 20 years.
Well, I disagree with you. I think what you meant to say is the chance of them picking up a remote control to control an FPV drone.
Yes, exactly. Picking up an FPV drone, like controller to do that. You're 100% right. But the thing that it comes back to for me is that, and I sound crazy. I've been saying this for a number of years, and I sound less crazy, I think, each year as things progress. But I've been saying to people, like, we are not moving fast enough. We are not prepared enough as a country or as an allied world. And I think the challenge, and I'm not trying to fearmonger, I'm just saying, you guys remember there was that Chinese ship that went between Australia and New Zealand back in February? I like to say it did a hot lap of Australia, right? They weren't whale watching, right? And the one thing people don't talk about is the fact that that Chinese ship was a missile cruiser with about 112 vertical launch cells on board. Australia Estimates, people will say Australia has less than 100 guided weapons across its entire arsenal. That one Chinese ship doing a hot lap of Australia had more missiles on board it than probably the entire Australian army combined. And it's not to say the Chinese are the enemy. What I'm trying to say is that you just think about what intimidation factor that sits at in terms of being able to do a whole lap of your country with a Chinese missile cruiser, or doing live fire exercises 150 nautical miles off the coast of Sydney, right? And I shouldn't say this, but like as soon as that was on the news, the number of people who called me up and said, hey, you know, the defense stuff you're talking about, it might have legs.
So Wu makes a very strong case for deterrence. But how do you build those spikes if everything is manufactured overseas? Next up, David Moodie explains how his tech, which literally started in the kitchen microwave, is bringing defense manufacturing back home to act as a massive global deterrent.
Share whatever you can share. I mean, just so like kind of, because I think it's important to kind of bring that information out so people understand, right? Like where things actually at.
Again, I got to be careful what I can actually say. I think what I didn't realize before I started getting called into these meetings and getting involved in this stuff was how close we are to conflict and how seriously other countries are taking this.
With China specifically.
With China specifically. And I think a lot of it, Ukraine has definitely pushed people's thinking in that, right? Where the unthinkable happened, you know, someone in this day and age went to war. Smart people went to war. Like, how could that be? And I think New Zealand is sitting here going, well, smart people won't, smart people stay out of this. But the problem is it's happening regardless of what you think. And so then going, well, do we want to be the country that is so ill prepared that we send people out to slaughter? Or do we want to be, getting prepared for this? And to me, what I'm doing, while wasn't initially for defense or anything like that, I can actually be part of the solution. And from my perspective, right, deterrent, I hope that my stuff never ends up in a war zone. But there is this deterrent. At the moment, America is toothless in terms of manufacturing, and the world knows it. So hey, they cannot. I don't know if you know about Freedom Forge. So World War II, America mobilized its industry. It's not defense industry, commercial industry to go. Ford went and made bombers and all these companies. That doesn't exist anymore. So going ahead, America actually can't right now build a war machine. So you're seeing, and that's why it probably frustrates some people, but you're seeing huge money being spent on groups that, like Andurils and Saronic and all these other companies that are building up this ability to manufacture. And if nothing else, what it's doing is it's saying, hey, we are able, if we had to, we are able to meet a conflict. And so therefore, kind of what I'm looking at with our stuff is saying, well, if America has this technology, they can build and respond extremely quickly. And that's a deterrent, saying, okay, well, I now know America's got teeth again.
David, I mean, is the main concern China's invasion of Taiwan? Because I don't think China's ever going to invade or do anything to America itself or New Zealand itself. It's just so far. But what is the actual, kind of threat?
Yeah. Okay. It is multifaceted, and I don't claim to know everything on this. But if you look at Taiwan, the concern there, from my understanding, is Taiwan is the biggest builder of microchips. Which is why you're seeing so much money being spent in America on microchips. If Taiwan was invaded, America loses the ability to compete electronically. And what we're seeing is that the war has changed. Now, I don't know how we've got so deep into war. We're seeing war has changed. It's no longer going to be, I've got the biggest machine. It's going to be, I've got swarms of stuff. I think, what did I see the other day? That a $30 billion or $300 billion aircraft carrier can be taken out by $3 million worth of drone. It's a complete change, right? And so then all of a sudden, microchip becomes one of the most important things. America loses Taiwan. America is on the back foot. It can't compete and therefore will be beaten in the technology war. So that, to me, that's my understanding of why Taiwan is such a big deal. So whether it is actually open war with America or whether it's just over Taiwan, yeah. But then I think, in Ukraine, the question is this going to spread further? And I think I saw a podcast the other day with ex-head of MI6, just saying that Europe needs to have hard power, right? And it's it's building up, and it's for no other reason than being a deterrent. Going back to, again, I don't want to sound like a warmonger because that's really not me, but I think we can play a role in being that deterrent.
It's crazy how the thinking around sovereign manufacturing has completely shifted and become critical for national security over the last couple of years. But who's funding all this hardware? Our last guest, James Pinner, runs a massive government-backed VC fund. He explains how the venture capital mindset and even strict government policies are rapidly shifting to back defense and dual-use technology.
So, and you've got, I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, startups, multi-billion-dollar startups, and in the US now, sort of trying to disrupt these big prime industries. Technology is hugely disruptive in military warfare, but there's huge beasts of machinery sort of behind the incumbents as well. Yeah, it seems like a small country like New Zealand, there's no reason why it couldn't be producing cheap disruptive warfare. And also, we've got companies sort of working on things like cybersecurity as well. So, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Crichton, trying to build secure operating systems, which on the defense side as well as the sort of military side.
Yeah, well, that's a good. That's a great kind of like, I think, point you raise, because I think New Zealand is sort of, I think, the only, I don't know, I think this is the only country where I heard some city where there's a lot of kind of protests, and there's a big kind of public policy stance around not hosting U.S. nuclear submarines back in the 70s or something. Kind of Kiwis are very proud of that kind of perception and what that means and what that says about them. And we've heard from a lot of our founders who are working in deep tech and hardware that could be dual use. They are, I think, at a first pass, very hesitant to work with defense or to go into defense or to work with American defense companies. But I think, and I think Rocket Lab initially, had to make that choice. Initially, they weren't wanting to do that either. Eventually, they made that choice, and I think they're now one of their biggest customers, the U.S. government. For satellite launch. Yeah, what do you think about that? I mean, do you guys as a fund have restrictions on companies that are in defense? I remember when we were applying or getting the certification for AIP, for example, I think we had to certify that we don't invest in companies that, I don't remember exact language, but it was something like, they couldn't be kind of defense related, or they couldn't be offensive capabilities or something. So there's definitely, I think, a position in the government that makes that sort of off limits. Whereas it feels like now that's actually a very interesting opportunity, not only from a financial point of view, but also from a strategic point of view of New Zealand having its own industry to eventually, if in the worst case, defend itself. Yeah,
it is a live topic. We are literally, in the next couple of weeks, sort of taking to the board some thoughts around how do we evolve our policies on this. Yes, the geopolitical landscape's changing. Yes, warfare's changing. We've talked about sort of disruptive technologies and drones and things like that, but also, the way civilian infrastructure is being challenged as well and attacked. So, and cybersecurity on top of that. There's all sorts of different ways, and it becomes even more broad. Currently, our policy is sort of restricted to indiscriminate weapons, things like cluster bombs and weapons that are, things that are actual weapons that are going to harm civilians, mines or those kind of things. But we had on top of that, we have a sort of a general consensus that we don't really do military at a stage without it being a hard and fast rule. So we have to navigate that quite carefully. And obviously our main concern is damaging the reputation of New Zealand. So we're very mindful of that. But as you say, like, mindsets globally are shifting. It's literally sort of month by month at this stage that we've gone from, over the last sort of until 3 years ago, a massive drop off for years in terms of defense spending globally, and now it seems to be all reversing over the next 10 years.
Thank you for tuning in to TechMates. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with friends. We'll be back soon with more stories of Kiwi and Aussie founders reshaping the future and disrupting down under. Until next time, keep dreaming big and daring to disrupt.